Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be talking about algebraic expressions. Something that's important to note for this video will be that we are going to need to look out for like terms. So here I've written a few terms and we're going to go through them and find each term's corresponding like terms. So for this first one we have x. So any term that has just a single x variable will be a like term for that x. So we can see that 2x will be a like term. Now what about 3x squared? Well, because this x is not an x alone, it is x squared, 3x squared is not the same as an x or a 2x. That x squared means that it's a completely different variable. So with that in mind, we can see that there are no like terms for 3x squared. And then lastly, we've got 5 and minus 1. Both of them don't have any x's or any variables associated with them. This means that they are both constants, and therefore they are like terms. For question 1, we've got one set of parentheses, and we are adding that to another set of parentheses. So once again, we are going to be needing to look out for like terms. So let's start with the first term in the first set of parentheses, 2x squared. And we have a look at the next set and we see that there is an x squared. So we can add these two together. Remember that x squared and 2x squared are like terms because of the variable x squared. So also remember that there is an invisible 1 in front of the x squared. So 2x squared plus x squared will give us 3x squared. Next, we'll have a look at the minus 4x. And in the other set of parentheses, we can see a plus 4x. Now, because both these terms have a single x variable, these are like terms. We add them together. So minus 4 plus 4 is just 0. So we don't even need to write that in. And lastly, we have a look at the constants. So we've got 3 and minus 4. They've got no x variable associated with them. They are constants, so we can add them together. 3 plus minus 4 gives us minus 1. And that is a final answer for question number 1. For question 2, we are once again adding two sets of parentheses. Right, so once again, we need to look out for like terms. So in the first set, we can see that we've got a 13x squared, and in the second, we've got 2x squared. So we are plussing. So 13x squared plus 2x squared will give us 15x squared. Next, we have a look at our x's. There are no x's in this set of parentheses, but we have a minus 11x in this one. So we keep it. And lastly, we're going to have a look at our constants. We've got minus 10 in the first set and 5 in the second. So minus 10 plus positive 5 gives us minus 5. And that is the answer for question number 2. For question 3, we're now multiplying two binomials by each other. So we're going to have to remember our FOIL method. Now remember, FOIL is F-O-I-L, and F stands for first, so we're going to multiply the first two terms by each other. So x times x gives us x squared. Next, O stands for outer, so the outer two terms, x times minus 4 gives us minus 4x. I stands for inner, so we're going to have 2 times x, gives us plus 2x. And then lastly, the letter L, which stands for last, we'll have 2 times negative 4, and that will give us negative 8. Now we're not finished yet because there is still some simplification that can happen. So there are no like terms for x squared, so we leave that alone. Minus 4x plus 2x, as we can see both terms have an x variable, so they are like terms and they can be added together. So minus 4x plus 2x gives us minus 2x. And lastly, because there are no other constants, we keep the minus 8. And that is the final answer for question number 3. For question 4, we're once again multiplying two binomials. So we'll once again need to remember our FOIL acronym. So F, which was for first, means we're going to multiply x by x, and this gives us x squared. O was for outer, so we multiply x by 2y, and this will give us plus 2xy. The next letter is I for inner, so we multiply y by x, and this gives us plus xy. And lastly, the letter L for last means we're multiplying the y by 2y, and this gives us plus 2y squared. Lastly, with our final step, we need to simplify. And to simplify, we need to find like terms. And by having a look at this expression over here, we see that 2xy and xy are like terms. So they will be added together. So let's read from left to right. We'll still keep the x squared the same. 2xy plus xy is the same as saying 2 apples plus an apple, 1 apple. So 2 plus 1 gives us 3 apples. So we'll have 2xy plus xy gives us 3xy. And then lastly, we keep the 2y squared. And that is our final answer for question 4. For question 5, we are now adding 3 different sets of parentheses. So we'll need to find like terms in each of the parentheses and then add them together or subtract them depending on what the different signs were. For this specific question, we've just got pluses, so we'll be adding each of the like terms. So let's start off with x squared. In the first set, we've got 7x squared. The next, we've got x squared. And the last, we've got 2x squared. So 7 plus 1 gives us 8, plus 2 gives us 10. So we'll have 10x squared. Next, we're going to have a look at our x's. Here we've got 8x. In the second set, we don't have any x's. And in the third set, we've got plus 8x. So the only two like terms for x are minus 8x and plus 8x. So minus 8 plus 8 gives us 0. So we will have 0x, and we don't need to write anything in for the x variable. Lastly, we can have a look at our constants. We've got minus 5 in the second set and plus 5 in the third set. Minus 5 plus 5 gives us 0. So our final answer is 10x squared. For question 6, we once again have two parentheses, but this time we are subtracting. However, before we subtract, we see that we've got a 5 in front of the first set of parentheses. So we will need to multiply that 5 in before we can do any subtraction. By multiplying in, I mean that we're going to multiply the 5 by each of the terms in the parentheses. So 5 times x squared will give us 5x squared, and 5 times 2 will give us plus 10. Now we've got our first set of parentheses, and we can minus the second set. When we minus, remember, we once again need to look out for like terms. So here we've got 5x squared, and there we've got 6x squared. So we can say 5 minus 6, and that will give us minus x squared. And for the constants, we've got a 10 there, and we are minusing minus 1. And remember, when we minus a negative, it's the same as adding. So it is essentially saying 10 plus 1, and that gives us positive 11. And that is our final answer for question 6. For question 7, we can see that we are going to need to apply 2 different forms of multiplication before we can continue. Meaning we're going to need to multiply all of that together and then do all of that multiplication, and only then are we going to be able to add the 2 sides together. So let's start. For the first set, we can see that we have got a difference of 2 squares over here, since we've got x minus 1 and x plus 1. And remember, we've got a shortcut to help us with that. So what we do, we're going to keep the 2 for now. Now remember our rule for a difference of 2 squares. We take the first term, which is x, and we square it. So that'll give us x squared. We minus, and then we square the last term. So 1 squared is just 1. Now we can multiply that out, and that will give us 2 times x squared is 2x squared, and 2 times minus 1 is minus 2. Now for the second set over here, we need to square those parentheses, and thankfully we've also got a rule for that. So our rule says that when we're squaring parentheses, we square the first term, so that'll give us 4x squared. We then multiply the 2 terms and double, so 2x times minus 1 is minus 2, but we double it, so it becomes minus 4x, and then we square the last term, so that becomes plus 1. So now our new expression is 2x squared minus 2 plus 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. Now we can simplify our expression, and to simplify, we need to find like terms. So here we've got an 2x squared, and in the parentheses we've got 4x squared. We are plussing, so 2x squared plus 4x squared gives us 6x squared. Next, we can have a look at our x's. We only have a minus 4x, so we keep that. And lastly, we can have a look at our constants. We've got a minus 2 plus a 1, so this becomes minus 2 plus 1, and that is just minus 1. And that is your final answer for question 7. For question 8, we are once again subtracting 2 different expressions. We are going to need to multiply out each of the expressions before we can add them together. So for the first, we need to multiply this x into the parentheses. So x times x gives us x squared, and x times 1 gives us plus x. Now, for the second set, we need to multiply x plus 1 by x minus 2, and this is just our straightforward FOIL method. So f for first means we're going to multiply x by x, and that gives us x squared. Next, multiply x by minus 2, gives us minus 2x. Next, x times 1, or 1 times x, gives us plus x. And lastly, 1 times minus 2 gives us minus 2. Now, we can subtract, since we have multiplied out the parentheses. So, x squared minus x squared gives us 0x squared, so we don't even need to write it in. Next, we look at our x's. So here we've got an x, here we've got minus 2x, and here we've got plus x. So x minus 2x. Now remember, minusing a minus is the same as plussing. So we've got x plus 2x, and we're going to minus x. So we've got x plus 2x minus x, and that will give us 2x. And lastly, we can have a look at our constants, which is just minus 2. So minus times the minus 2, and that becomes plus 2. And that is our final answer for question 8. For question 9, it looks like we've got quite a bit going on. We've got numbers in front of our parentheses, but we're also squaring both of them. So we need to remember our ordering, because if we proceeded in the wrong order, our answer is going to be wrong. The first thing we do in a situation like this is we're going to square the parentheses. Some of you might be tempted to multiply the constants in immediately. Unfortunately, that would be wrong. Our first step is to square each of the parentheses. And thankfully, we've got a rule for when we square binomials. So we'll keep the 4 there. And our rule states that when we're squaring a binomial, we will square the first term. So we'll have 4x squared. We'll then multiply and double. So 2x times minus 3 gives us 6x. We double that, and we get minus 12x. And then lastly, we square the last term, so that becomes plus 9. For the second binomial, we have a minus 9. We once again are going to use our rule. So we square the first term. We then multiply and double. So we get plus 4x. And then lastly, we square the last term. So this becomes plus 4. Now, since we have squared each of our binomials, we will then take the constants and multiply them into the parentheses. So we start with the first set. We get 4 times 4x squared gives us 16x squared. 4 times minus 12x gives us minus 48x. And lastly, 4 times 9 gives us 36. Now for the second set, minus 9 times x squared gives us minus 9x squared. Minus 9 times 4x gives us minus 36x. And lastly, minus 9 times 4 gives us minus 36. Now we need to simplify this expression. To do that, we need to identify the like terms. Firstly, we look at the 16x squared and see if there are any like terms. Here we've got a minus 9x squared. They are like terms because of the x squared. So 16 minus 9, that gives us 7x squared. Next, we can have a look at the x's. Here we've got minus 48x, and here we've got minus 36x. This then gives us minus 84x. And lastly, we have a look at our constants. Here we've got plus 36, and here we've got minus 36. Plus 36 minus 36 just gives us 0. So our final answer for question 9 is 7x squared minus 84x. Lastly, for question 10, we once again need to square a binomial and then multiply a term into the parentheses. So let's do that. Once again, we have a rule for squaring binomials. Let's just write the 3x there first. So when we square the binomials, we square the first term. So 2 squared gives us 4. We then multiply the two terms and double them. So 2 times minus 5x gives us minus 10x, but we double them, so we get minus 20x. And lastly, we square the last term, so minus 5x squared gives us plus 25x squared. Right, so now we have dealt with the squaring of the binomial. We now need to multiply that term into the parentheses. So that means we're going to multiply the 3x by the 4, by the minus 20x, and by the 25x squared. So 3x times 4 gives us 12x. 3x times minus 20x gives us minus 60x squared. And lastly, 3x times 25x squared gives us plus 75x cubed. Lastly, we must remember to write our expression out in descending powers of x. That means we start with our term which has the highest power of x, so that would be 75x cubed minus 60x squared plus 12x. And that is a final answer for question number 10. It wouldn't have been wrong if you had left your answer like this, but it is more correct to write your answer in descending order of powers of x.